Hello and welcome to another edition of your favourite podcast, Insane in the Membrane, with me, Rich Wilson. And this week I'm joined by the brilliant Tiffany Murray. Hello, Tiffany.
Hello, Rich.
Hello. Is it Tiffany? What do you prefer?
I prefer Tiff, but on the books it's Tiffany. I prefer Tiff. Yeah, my mother still spells my name wrong, just with one F, but it's two.
Oh, really? Even though she gave it to you.
Yeah, which probably means her way is right.
Oh yeah, probably. It's funny when we're trying to set these up, and you know, this is why I'm glad I've got producer Paul, because he does all the bits where he makes the guests move around and move all their bits and bobs. Because I have no idea. I just sit here and wait for him to do it. So thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me, Rich. It's lovely.
I tell you what, this is the thing, because I messaged you last night just to double check that we were all good for today, and then I hadn't realised the time, because we work on different, we don't have orthodox lives, do we? We're all sort of all over the place, and I didn't realise. And then when you fired back, oh yeah, I'm still here, I'm still ready, and blah blah, and then you were telling me you were on a rail replacement bus.
I was taking one for the team on a rail replacement bus, and it wasn't even late. It's like the last train out of London to get to where I live is, 10:28, because that's the witching hour. So it wasn't even late.
See, that's it. It's always this is why I moved from Brighton, because I used to love living down there, but to get back to Brighton was always a pain in the arse. And in the end, I'm like, I'd rather move. And sometimes they go, oh yeah, we're not even going to do that now. We're not even going to go back there. You have to figure it out. And like, what are you talking about? I just want to go home. And you end
that's
up.
What happened to me last night? Yeah.
And listen, and you probably had a long day. You've been busy. You just want to go home.
Yeah. And then there's the problem of how the hell do you get from the train station to where you actually live?
Oh yeah. So you do live out like producer Paul lives in the woods.
Oh, me too. Hence the delay, probably, and the connection.
Yeah.
The squirrels are in the telephone wire.
This is the beauty of living out in the countryside. I'm glad I moved out there, but at the same time, it's like the other day, the phones were a bit dodgy and we didn't have any connection. And then someone in the town just went, oh yeah, when it rains, all the phone lines go weird.
Yeah. And it's like, don't you know that? You can't be from round here if you don't know that. On a Tuesday, that's when they go out.
That's it, yeah. And I'm like, oh, you London folk.
Oh, you're funny.
So have you been out? So are you touring the book, going around? Because you got a book out, which is a wonderful book. If you tell us a bit about that for the benefit of the listeners.
Yeah.
There we are. My Family and Other Rock Stars.
So my Family and Other Rock Stars, and I'm a novelist, but it's a memoir. It's my first memoir. And when I was a very young kid, my mum and we lived in a house in Herefordshire. She ran out of money. The way my mother is, she didn't think, oh, I know, I'll get a job. She put an advert in the Times that said rehearsal space for bands, no heavy rock. And the first band who replied, or the manager that replied, were for Black Sabbath. So we had, that was the first.
Like the opposite.
That was fine. That was very relaxing. And so we sort of shared our house with them, and they're rehearsing, and various other things happened. And then we had Queen, and that was in sort of 74, when bits of Bohemian Rhapsody were being composed, but obviously it was for sheer heart attack. And then a wonderful band called Tracks that's nobody's heard of, and I urge everybody to look up their one video that they have for a song called Wasn't It Nice on YouTube because they were just wonderful. And a great Irish band called Horselips, who I fell in love with. And then what happened was Mum would cook for these bands, feed these masterpieces and one-hit wonders and forgotten songs. And she needed to leave the relationship she was in. And when a local recording studio called Rockfield phoned her up, because all the bands went then to Rockfield to actually record, basically it was because of the band saying, "Oh God, you've got to get this woman in, Joan. Her food is amazing." And so Kingsley Ward from Rockfield Studios called her up and said, "Hello, Joan, I hear you can cook." And so that was it. We moved to Rockfield, and that was just over the border in Wales. So that was my childhood at Rockfield Studios, surrounded by, I'm an only child, so surrounded by other kids, which is fantastic. And just all these bands from 75 to sort of 81. So that whole transition from heavy rock to, my threshold music, my childhood music, from David Bowie to Echo and the Bunnymen, Teardrop Explodes, Bauhaus, The Damned. Wow. So yeah, it was eventful, hence the memoir.
It was funny because I met you at Green Man, and it was the first festival where I hadn't gotten messy the night before. I'd had my wife and my small child with me, little Bodie, and they'd gone home the night before, and my wife had said, "Right, we're going, you can have a good time." This was like on the Saturday night, and I'm like, "Yeah, I will, I'll get involved with something." And I ended up back, I was sleeping in my car, I had an airbed in the car, and I just went, "Oh, I'm going to go to bed." And I was in bed at midnight at a festival, which meant I was then up early on the Sunday, and I went to the comedy tent to see what was happening. So I didn't know what was going on, and I was like, "Oh, they're having authors on. Oh, brilliant." So I got a cup of tea, I got an orange and some breakfast, and I was just sat there watching, and then you came on, and I was immediately blown away by your stories in your book, and I couldn't wait to talk to you. I was so excited because all the bands and all the music you talked about is exactly what I'm into, and it's such fascinating stories. What was it like as a kid? Because you can't. Were you aware? You weren't aware of who these people were, like the level that these people were.
Oh, sorry, I'm not interrupting you to say, "Oh, thanks, Rich," because it would go.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to. I was trying to get to the end of it.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you slept in your car and then got up early and had an orange for breakfast, which is very important, to get some fruit. So oh, it was lovely, and it was lovely to meet you as well backstage. And as a kid, no, you just, of course, you had no idea who these people were, these adults, because it was your kid world. And once I moved to Rockfield, we did have a kind of thing, me and the other kids, where we'd be playing, and there's a part in the book where Queen are recording all the layers of Galileo Figaro on Bohemian Rhapsody, and we're just like, oh, as kids do, because they're just, oh, bloody adults. Oh. So shall I read a little? There's a tiny bit of that. I can read that if you like. So this is called Lazing on a Sunday Afternoon, which is a track from the album. So it's myself and 5 other Rockfield kids who are the proper Rockfield kids. I'm just an interloper living there with my mum. Our rounders' posts are dustbin lids in the quadrangle courtyard. Our rounders' bat is an old wooden tennis racket. We have a single yellow tennis ball, so we must be careful. Lisa is on first dustbin lid post. Amanda is on second. Karina and Bridget are third and fourth by the stables. Young Charles is throwing the ball, and I'm going to hit it. Queen are still Galileoing through the double doors at my back, and the trick is, in between the Galileos, don't hit the ball too far over the chalet roof and lose it to the high grass. The best place to aim is the track between the stables and the tack room. Hit it, Tiff, Bridget says. I think she'd rather be riding her Hanoverian stallion or talking to my mum. She looks so grown up in her denim flares and black waistcoat with bare arms. I squint and I focus. I love rounders. Before young Charles can throw the ball, the doors behind me burst open and Queen tumble out. They see us, laugh, and run to our dustbin lids. They clap their hands and say, "Hit it," to me. Young Charles throws, but it's not very hard, and I hit a lacklustre lob that Freddie catches. I'm out. Lisa and Amanda back away from their posts. I hand over my tennis racket. We try to play with them, but they're grown-ups and we get bored. We slink off to my chalet, wipe the summer sweat from our top lips, and I pour out Robinson's barley water in 6 wine glasses. We listen to Queen play our rounders through the open door. "You're lucky having your own bedroom," Lisa says, as she looks at my single bed under the stairs. "It's not a bedroom," I tell her. "But you don't have to share, do you?" We all decide that the barn is the best place to be, and we run back outside through Queen's game. We holler and whoop, and they stop to watch us. But we're gone, sprinting past the stables and up the brick alley to the old mattress and the high drop from the top of the barn. Queen aren't allowed up here. It is ours. So that's kids claiming ownership.
See, that is what I love about the book, is that stories like that, you're talking about what you were doing as children, being children, running around whilst, you know, the rock royalty is just wandering around you and recording some of the most classic music of the last century. And yet the kids are like, "Oh, this again." They're just, it's Galileo again. You've been doing it all afternoon. You know, and kids are just like, "Yeah, you know,
Mum."
yeah, exactly. You're like, "Oh, you've got your own bedroom." "Yeah, but it's not a proper bedroom. I want a proper bedroom. I haven't got a TV in my room." You know, that stuff like that. And yet you've got Queen, who are recording something that's going to go on to be one of the biggest songs in history. And kids are like, "Yeah, but we don't want them up here. We don't want the grown-ups up here." It's such a lovely. That's what I love about the book. It's such a beautiful thing that you've done.
Oh, thank you, Rich. That's lovely of you. And it did, you know, it's trying to find your way in a memoir is because really it's about a family and the family coming together and breaking apart and coming together again. So it's pitching it correctly, where I knew I didn't want to write a memoir about, you know, what particular studio gadget was used for track 3 on, you know, bloody blah, because that's not my, I don't, you know, that's a lot of research. I just wanted to focus on the child's point of view in this completely over the top adult world, which it actually didn't matter whether these people were musicians or not. In the 70s, I think for pretty much all kids, it was an over the top an over the top adult world, because you were seen and not heard. You were just in an adult world. So I was lucky that this adult world was at least interesting.
I think that's the charm of the book. The beauty of the book is that it's, like you just said, it talks about really, like a really tragic thing, like a family breaking up, which is always horrible for kids and the parents to go through, you know, and the parents try and hide a lot of it from you. You don't really know what's gone on between the two of them. There's just a bit of confusion with the kid, like, well, why aren't mum and dad together? And it just goes to show you, it doesn't matter what's going on in the background, it doesn't matter what life you lead, those things are still real, they're still painful. You know, it just adds a lot of colour to the background of your particular situation, where you go, yeah, mum and dad broke up, it was really sad, blah, blah. Oh, by the way, David Bowie was recording this, that and the other in the background, but it's like, that's almost like, that was nice, but this was what was really happening. That's what I love about the book. It's a beautiful thing.
Oh, that's lovely. You keep saying nice things. It's very nice of you. But I do. Basically, the book, or you know, when I read it, I had to read it to my mother because she has a very busy life, so she didn't, you know. get round to reading it. And she's like, "Oh God, can't you just read it to me?" But she had to legally, pass on it.
really?
And she did say to me, "Well, it's all very well and yeah." She said, "Well, it's all very well and good, Tiffany, but you don't tell, whoever might read this, what wonderful things I got up to." And of course, she meant being a single woman, a single very attractive woman, and a
Right.
nurturing woman, feeding all these bands at Rockfield. And so I was like, "Well, Mum, it's in the present tense, first person, from the child's point of view. I can't because that's your story. You can't, as a 6-year-old, saying, 'Oh, my mum had a lovely time last night.'" No, it's like
We were playing rounders. We
it's
hadn't
like,
seen Mum.
wow,
Yeah,
oh, okay then.
we were playing rounders. We haven't seen Mum for
Little
3
Mum.
hours.
Yeah, exactly. She disappeared. Oh no, yeah.
Oh, she was at the
But,
shop.
she's 82 now. She's still here. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And and so she wanted to celebrate. Obviously her youth. Who wouldn't? I'm in my mid-50s now, and I'm like, yeah, makes sense. But it had to be from that child point of view. And so when David Bowie gets there, it's the shift. That's when the shift happens, because my family life is pretty stable, with as stable as things got in the 70s, because we met my future stepfather, Fritz Fryer, who did all the things like teaching me to basically breathe and swim and ride a bike and polish brass, because he was from Blackburn. But he also had his own, he was, nowadays I suppose you'd say he was bipolar, but he always said to me that it was bad acid. So, and that was all his thing was always, "Don't take acid, Tiff." And so I never did.
Oh, wow.
Which was also another very good lesson. So yeah, by the time Bowie came around, I was very stable with Mum and Fritz, and so then the book can focus on, that teen obsession, or 10-year-old, 11-year-old obsession with these bands that come. So that was a lot of fun to revisit that.
Yeah. Do you remember? So, were you a fan of Bowie before he turned up, or was it a moment?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was the girls that I mentioned in that little extract, Karina and Bridget, they were much older than me. Actually, they were only 6 or 5 years older than me. But when you're a kid, that's like, oh my God, they're these brilliant, amazing girls, with hair flicks and red jeans, and they take me to go and see Grease, and it was Karina that played me David Bowie. And I'd be staring at Diamond Dogs and opening the double album, as a 7-year-old, just obsessed. So, and Mum played, as a kid, she always played Lou Reed's Transformer and Hunky Dory.
Wow.
So those are the two. So I was nurtured into David Bowie. So when he came, it was like this massive disconnect, because none of us could compute, apart from my mother, who was like, "Oh yes, he's very nice, but I'm very busy," But we, all the kids, we were just like, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do." But yeah, so it turned into a slightly mythic thing. Nobody could quite decide. When I went to interview people, everybody had a different story. They were like, "He was here for a month. He was here for 24 hours. He was here for a week. He came in a helicopter." No, Sandra picked him up from Newport train station in her Volvo with the black lab in the back. He just appeared from behind a wardrobe.
That sounds more like him.
Fits. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. With the last video, yeah.
But it's the like, again, all this was going on, but you also were dealing with everyday life stuff, like, your mum's new partner, which is always going to be tricky. And how did you feel, when that started, when your mum sort of introduced you? Do you remember? That must have felt strange, like mum's meeting has got a new partner.
I mean, it was it was because of Fritz, because we lived in this chalet. There There were a long line of stables just opposite the quadrangle courtyard, which is where, the bands with money behind them, record company money behind them, recorded, and Mum's kitchen was in the corner. And we would live with the bands. And that's one thing that Lisa Ward, who now runs Rockfield with her dad Kingsley and her mum Anne, said, well, you were in it, Tiff. We weren't allowed to come up as little kids. So I was, left to my own devices as Mum was working. But when it was just Mum and me, it was an open plan chalet, stairs going up. I slept in her bedroom. I had like a single mattress on the floor, and she had the bed at the, and I remember loving that and thinking, oh, it's like camping. And then when Fritz arrived, of course, it's not practical when you're in your early 30s having a new relationship with somebody to have your 6-year-old child on a mattress at the bottom of your bed. So they were grown up enough to know that wasn't quite the done thing. So it was because of Fritz that I was moved downstairs under the stairs. I mean, it was still open plan, but so I remember really resenting him because of that. But he had a dog called Boggle, who had one ear up, one ear down, and he had a limp. And I fell in love with Boggle, even though Boggle was he was a really angry, he was an angry middle-aged man.
Yeah.
But he was like, get off, get out, this is my master, you two can just do one. But I was obsessed with Boggle, that kid thing where you just want to touch a dog and it just goes...
Yeah.
And that was me going, please love me, please. But I knew about dogs as well, so I knew not to get too close. But he was a tiny, pretty tiny mutt. So I was downstairs with Boggle, so hence I kind of accepted Fritz at the same time. But then, as I said before, Fritz was the person who taught me all those basic practical things that my mother had kind of bypassed. And then when we moved, and we had to move because of the bed situation, I was distraught at leaving Rockfield. But that's when Fritz really took over, because Mum was working full time, doing wine bars, doing 2 bands, maybe 3 some nights at Rockfield, enjoying herself too. And then Fritz was the one, because he was a producer and engineer, but sometimes he'd just have no work. So he was the one who was left alone with me at the house, and he had this amazing chest of LPs, and he didn't know what to do with a child, so he just played music to me, and he played the band and Graham Parsons and Dolly Parton and Emmylou Harris. So I was just in seventh heaven.
It's so lucky to have you're so lucky.
Read.
Yes, please.
I mean, there was other stuff, but so what happened when we were at this other? We'd moved away from Rockfield, but I still went there every night because Mum still cooked, and Mum didn't really know how to deal with me being such in her words, a spoilt child. Making a fuss. Because you can't make a fuss in the 1970s. And I was a nightmare, because she was working so hard and she couldn't quite deal with that as well. And so what Fritz used to do is he would take me on this post office van that he had, because he'd also started painting and decorating, because he produced Squeeze and he produced Motorhead, one after the other, but both albums were shelved. So it was a bit of a, nowadays you'd say a mental health drop for him. So he would paint the garden furniture all in different colours, and he got this post office van, which was red, obviously, and he painted it with one paintbrush. He painted it green. But there was a practical side to that, because he'd go down to the bottom of the hill and put himself out there as a painter and decorator. So no matter how his mental health suffered, he was a northerner through and through. I say he was, because he sadly died about 16 years ago. But he was always practical, and it's a stereotype, I know, but that's what I grew up with. He always thought, right, how can I support my family? Blah, blah, blah. So it was always that. So he was down there after producing Motorhead with his ladders and paintbrushes. So he would put me on the top of his van, and then he'd drive me around the little lanes, and he'd play music. So Fritz pushes in a tape, and the Flying Burrito Brothers sing about a Sin City as he lets the hand-painted Morris Minor crawl down our steep drive. I'm on the roof, and I fall forward, head over the end of the roof rack. I said, "Hold on, Tiff." We turn left onto the lane, and I have to right myself as Graham sings about his Sin City, and our woods crackle with heat. Fritz bangs the driver door. "Ready? We're off." And the Morris catches on gears and verge nettles. I giggle in pleasure and fear, my cheeks tight with the salt of crying and sweating, because every night I have to leave Rockfield. We drive past the derelict Sunday school chapel at the bottom of our garden. Fritz changes gear. The van climbs, and I must wedge my feet between the roof rack bars to stop me falling off the back. This is the part of the lane where you need to hold your breath, but I forget, and the stink of dead fox hits me. Fritz speeds up. He can smell it too. Graham sings as we zip past the gamekeeper's cottage where hunting dogs bounce and bark from tall cages. We drive down the small sharp hill towards the mission. I hold on extra tight. The dogs howl behind us, and Fritz turns up the music. We take the tight bend and roll into the nuns and fathers and brothers' mission courtyard, as the other brothers, the Flying Burrito Brothers, cry out another ooh about their city of sin. When I look up, nun faces are gazing down from open windows, and Fritz cries, "Yeehaw!" We drive on through the mission arch, a green hand-painted Morris Minor van with a little girl on the roof and cosmic American music blasting. This becomes a habit. When we get back from delivering food to Rockfield, I climb up onto the van roof rack, the metal still warm from the day, and Fritz works through the gears, loops our lane, and plays the band, the Flying Burrito Brothers, Gram Parsons and his own J.J. Cale, or the tracks he records for me, Old Shep by Elvis and Me and Little Andy by Dolly Parton. And once it's dark, Fritz will slow the painting and decorating van he doesn't truly want, and he'll tell me to look up. It is astounding, all those stars, so far away but so close. And the more you look, the more you see. Fritz stays in the driver's seat as the band harmonise on Acadian driftwood. But I'm lost in the night sky and the universe, or the universes, and it's hot, and the stars will always be brighter than anything on Gram Parsons' nudie suit. I wonder if the nuns at the mission are sleeping, and if we are really getting another dog, a red setter, because Mum said, why not? Fritz doesn't like the sound of a pedigree. "Ready?" he says, as he hits the driver's door and with the flat of his hand, and I hold on to the metal bar of the roof rack, face still up at the sky, because I'm getting good at this. I hold on for dear life, and we fly. I don't wonder what Fritz thinks about on these hot summer nights, when he crunches gears on his knackered gearbox to entertain a child he barely knows, while the woman he's grown so attached to sleeps off her hot, hard work at home. So there's a little bit of Fritz.
Wow. This is again what I love, is that there's so many layers, and it's just these. It's like you've got, that a thing that a lot of us did. Like the way grown-ups were with us back then. I was always on the bonnet of a car, or I was getting dragged along in a boat behind a car, or there was 20 of us in the back of a van just rattling around. You've got those beautiful images of what it was like to be a kid back then, when health and safety was very much an afterthought. And then you've got the backdrop again of the bands that Fritz was producing and the music that you were listening to as well. My mum and dad, I was really lucky that my mum and dad had really decent taste in music, so I grew up with the band and Queen and old blue stuff, but then modern stuff would come along, like like ska and reggae, and I was just surrounded by all this, and I think it makes such a difference to children. They might not necessarily know what they're listening to, but it definitely influences them. And I think it's so important to surround your kids with different literature and music and that, because it pays off, as we can see with you. So we're really lucky, I think.
Yeah, and I think I'm probably being a little rude by saying our generation. I suspect you might be younger than me, but
Only
to
by a
have
couple of
those
years.
vinyl album only by a couple of years. We're not saying anything. We're not declaring anything. But to have those vinyl LPs, that they were like stories themselves. They were like storybooks. To be able to take them from a shelf or wherever, and to open them up when it was a double album as well, and you'd have all these pictures and all these words, so all these sleeve note stories and all these lists of names, and to me that was like going to the library, and reading a book. And I think that's what I'm trying to recreate in My Family and Other Rock Stars, because every section begins with a set list, not just the bands that were at Rockfield at that time, but the music that we listened to as a family. And yeah, and I talk, and a few album covers appear because I think that's very important. But it must be, generations now. It's just, let's just put some vague Spotify Buddha bar thing on, and I sound like such an old codger, but it's just like, it's not quite the same, is it?
It's very my middle son's very much into his music, and surprised me growing up when he came up to me one day, and he was only young, and he just said, "Oh, Dad, do you know that song American Woman?" And I'm like, and I thought he meant Lenny Kravitz, because that was the one was around. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, Lenny Kravitz." And he went, "No, Dad, no." He goes, "It's called, they're by the Guess Who." And I'm like, "How do you know that band?" And he went, "Oh, it's on my Guitar Hero game." And I'm like, the kids are finding it. They are finding it. They'll find it in their own way, but they are finding it. So we have to maybe not trust not trust the way that they're getting it, but they are getting it. So at least they're getting it, I think, is my point.
Yeah. And those, have you seen those? I love them. I'm terrible. Waste so much time. Those wonderful YouTube videos of like young kids playing something like Jolene, or but the Jolene one is the one that sticks in my mind. And they're just like, they're just like, man, that's amazing, and they've never heard it before,
Yeah.
and they're just hearing this old codger stuff for the first time, and they're losing it. I just love it. I love it. I watch them all the time.
Or like the amount of texts that I received when he was growing up, and it was like, "Oh, Dad, you've got to check out the Doors. You've got to check out this band, Led Zeppelin." I'm like, "All right, yeah, I'll give them a go. Yeah, I'll give them a go." I never turned around and went, "No, I already know about them." I always ever went, "Oh, yeah, I'll give them I'll try it, mate. I'll try it." Because they're kids. I don't want him to. Yeah, I'm glad he's finding it.
Yeah, rather than turning around and saying, "Oh, well, you've got to listen to the third album because the second track, the production is yeah." You just want to let them find it themselves.
I do remember saying to my dad, suggesting stuff to my dad, and my dad going, "Oh yeah, that sounds cool," and because you felt so good telling your dad, "Oh, Dad, I've heard this song," and he's like, "All right, yeah, well, we'll go and listen to the album." You felt like there was a connection with your parents, and that's so important for kids.
Yeah, no, I do remember during, because I was very lucky being exposed to music. Yes, at Rockfield, but don't forget that's always rehearsing music, so it's that bit repeated again and that bit unless you're invited into the studio to listen to the whole playback, which sometimes we were. Oh God, even worse. You're not invited. You're dragged into the studio to do a child back chorus for Hawkwind. I remember we're just sitting there with Hawkwind going, no. Help. The oh God, I've lost me. Hello, middle age. I've lost me thread now. Um, but what were you saying,
So
Rich?
we were talking about the
Help me out.
connections. You were saying about it was all very well, like the music was great, yes, but it was rehearsing music,
Yeah,
so you weren't getting like the full
yeah.
benefit of the track.
Oh, yeah. It's
Yeah.
about fathers and yeah. So
Yes.
when I found my own, and then I when I found my own music, 79 onwards, really from Fritz loved Blondie,
Brilliant.
the band, even though I kept saying to him, that's not her name is Debbie Harry. He's still called Debbie Harry Blondie, but hey ho. Um, that I always remember Fritz not being entirely impressed, but also being so great at driving me to gigs. He drove me to psychedelic furs, to soft cell, to Duran, all these in
Wow.
Birmingham and Bristol, sort of the early 80s, 80, 81. And I'd always say, you're going to come in. He's like, your mother and I are going to go off for a curry. It was always, it wasn't quite his thing, but he'd still, say, right, this is what she wants. So we'll, because I would get the NME and, do that kid thing of going through the gig lists
Yes.
and then yeah. So he was great, but it's that transition when you're playing your own music. He didn't quite think, oh, they're great
I
when I was playing Bauhaus full blast.
see. That's really cool. I mean, the first band I ever saw was the Damned, and my dad took me to see them. We'd seen them on the Young Ones, yeah. So I
Oh,
would have been 14. So that was 1986, and so ever since then, it's been a thing of ours that we go and see the Damned whenever we can. We're going to see them in a couple of weeks' time, actually, at the Roundhouse. Um, and it's just that's what I mean. It's those, yeah. There was like my dad took me to see Level 42 in the 80s, and I know for a fact he hated every minute, but he still took me.
he's he's holding that bass guitar very high.
Yeah, what's with his thumbs? So that rubbish. But they still did it. They
No, there's
still
because
did it.
there's yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of the Damned in my family and other rock stars because they were there a lot and they
Mm.
still go back to Rockfield and that he definitely that was one of the kids, the collective, the girls at least, the collective coming of age. Even though I was much younger, I came of age at a much younger age because it was just the environment. We'd be peeking out of the window watching Dave Vanian with a Dracula cape walking up and down the track, just going,
Wow.
just that kind of peeking, and then, oh, did he see you? Did he see you? No, and we were just absolutely obsessed. And we go to they'd always have these big parties at the old mill, which was another Rockfield building back then, and all the well, I'd go with Mum Fritz anyway. And there's a particular chapter about in the book about a particular happening that happened at a seminal moment at a Damned. Um, it wasn't really a gig; it was just them playing a few because they did my favorite band album. They did the Black Album there,
Yes.
that beautiful double album. Which what? Hold on. See, I'm sounding like wasn't it produced by Vangelis? I should know
Yeah, he
this.
was.
It's
Yeah,
something
Vangelis
you
was
wouldn't put
involved.
together. Yeah,
Yeah, he was involved
yeah.
somewhere. I've just been listening to John Robb's The Art of Darkness, the history of goth, and I'm sure that's what he mentions in that. I'm sure he mentions Vangelis. Some,
Yeah.
like you say, somebody that you wouldn't
Isn't that
in a million years connect with the Damned.
rat scabies and Vangelis
Yeah.
went for tea in Monmouth? No, I don't know, but they might have.
But this is it. Do you not? Was it later on when when because it's a bit different, but there's like famous comedians now that I came through with, like Mickey Flanagan and people like that, Greg Davis, and people are like, oh my god, I love Mickey, I love Greg, but I'm like, oh, that's Mickey because I've sort of knew him before,
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel the same to me. I'm like, yeah, it's just Mickey. Is it the same with you? Like, you know,
Yeah.
you go like, well, it's just Freddie. Yeah, it's just Freddie from the band. You know.
Well, not really, because we didn't. I mean, I wasn't a professional in that. I was, in their world. I was a tyke. I was a child that, what wasn't as interesting as the dog, because Freddie loved my dog, this beautiful Great Dane I had called Cleo. So it was seen and not heard, really. And and also we left Rockfield, Mum, in like 82, 81, 82. So, and then we had no connection at all, because we just all got on with our own lives. But in writing this book, as well as contacting Rockfield, who've just been amazing, and if anybody would ever want to go on a tour there, they do wonderful Rockfield tours. I've contacted a few musicians, like Graham Parker, who I adore. He did Heat Treatment there, and Nick Lowe, and Brian May, and Geddy Lee. And they wouldn't know me from Adam. I'm not even sure they would remember Mum. But they all came back with some sort of memory, not just about my mother, but about Fritz as well. And it was just beautiful. Like, Graham Parker was like, I remember your mum's trout. I was like, oh, Lord. No, but it really genuinely was the trout in almond, sea trout with, done in a parcel in the oven with butter. Thank God.
Imagine.
I know. La 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 la. La.
Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, and Brian May said, "Well, I'm not sure I remember your mum, which it's fine. These million other people." He said he remembers Fritz really fondly, because he said that it was Fritz who encouraged him to sing. Fritz took him to a basement in Soho because Fritz produced the band Smile. Back in the day. I don't think it was that particular EP was released at all. And it was a song called April Lady that he'd written. And apparently Fritz was the one who said, no, you can do this.
Wow.
And Brian said, yeah, and I was really in awe of Fritz, because he was in, to me he was a famous person, because he was in this band called the Four Pennies, and they had a #1 in the 60s and da-da-da. And it was that wonderful shifting of, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You looked at him? Yeah. What? And it's just that lovely human. He was just so generous, and he had this wonderful photograph, 3D photograph he'd taken, Freddie hugging Cleo, and it just all these things. I can't say thank him enough for being so open and generous with his, It was just lovely to hear that. It really was.
See, this is it.
It's
lovely.
And the trout.
And the trout. I remember your mum's trout. Well, it was there's the chapter trying to get. Well, I can't remember. It was about Freddie, trying to get Freddie to eat something. Trying to make him eat. It was one.
No, that was Lemmy.
Lemmy, sorry, it was Lemmy.
Yeah,
I do apologise. Yes.
Yeah. No. They're easily confused.
And I'm like, it was my favourite. It was one of the reasons that made me want to talk to you is because you talked about this bit at the festival, and then you signed my book, and you even mentioned it in that. And it was Lemmy. I do apologise. And what was it? You were trying to get him to eat something or have something.
Mum was paid extra money by the record company just to get some food into him. It didn't matter what, basically. This is only a tiny bit. I can read this. So Fritz was in the studio because Dave Edmunds was producing them, but just bowed out after, just couldn't cope. And so Fritz stepped in. And so she was obsessed about trying to nurture them because she wanted to keep Fritz alive as well. It was the record company who told Mum they'd pay her extra to get food into Lemmy. She sat the black and silver cloud of him down at the empty dining room table. So what do you like to eat? She asked. Lemmy told her Jack Daniels. She said, lasagna. And he said, don't be stupid, Joan. She said, OK then, beurre en croûte. And he said, now you're taking the piss. So she said, what about a bacon sandwich, Lemmy? OK, Joan, but I like the crust cut off and the bacon well done to burn and mother's pride, none of that brown bread hippie shit, and lots of salty butter and Heinz tomato ketchup, thank you very much, Joan, and a plate of baked beans. Mum says, underneath it all, Lemmy is very polite. In fact, Motorhead are nice boys. Well, maybe the jury's out on the one called Animal. He needs to put some bloody clothes on when he's wandering around outside. So that's the little...
I like the way you've got Lemmy, this, you know, with his reputation, and it's like, well, you're not getting down from the table until you've had your dinner.
Absolutely. I mean, she was very, you know, she was like the soul of Hattie Jakes in a Julie Christie, you know, exterior.
Wonderful.
Just she would not stand any nonsense. I mean, not that it impacted most bands; they just ignored it. But she said the thing about Lemmy, he was just everything had to be, you know, you had to be polite, you know, particularly to women. It was like, thank you very much. And then when his parents or his mum and stepdad arrived, and he just couldn't deal with it, and so he gave Mum. When I interviewed her, she said, "Yes, he gave me £100.
Wow.
And I took them out to lunch, and we had fruits de mer."
But this is what I like, is that those stories, you know, of Lemmy, the rock star. Again, I've heard. I don't know anyone. The stories I've heard about Lemmy where they've gone, oh, he was a bit of a shit. Like he was, you know, he was a rock star, and he probably didn't suffer fools like a lot. But that's like most people. If you're a dickhead, then I don't want to be around you, and I'm going to just ignore you. But if you're decent, then you know I'll give you the time of day, and I think it just goes to show how respected your mum was. That these people actually took their time and they did listen to her.
Yeah, and she always, you know, she always said that most producers, not all of them, but most producers really looked after her. Like sometimes they'd come into the kitchen and say, "Do you know what, Joan? You're not cooking tonight. We're taking you out." You know,
Wow.
and people like, you know, Mutt Lange and John Anthony, and you know these sort of big hitters that we didn't realise they were big hitters, but now retrospectively, you know, they knew that without her, you know, some of their boys, if you like, because they were all men and they were all boys back then, the bands, wouldn't actually probably be able to function, because at least they got some good food.
Yeah.
So yeah, they did, you know, and she would, you know, not talking about women, middle class women in kitchens or anything, but I said, well, what were your, did you have rules of the kitchen? And it's in the book. It's, you know, it's meant to be funny. I think in, you know, today's world probably not. But she was like, well, one of my rules was don't grab the cook's tits from behind, and that was genuinely that was genuine. No, I'm
That's
not.
fair enough. That's fair enough.
You know, with a fair enough. You know, and also, and the other side of that was, you know, do not say to me that you don't like it if you haven't tried it, which is what you say to a kid. Well, have you tried it? Well, you can only say you don't like it. You know? So it was all of that.
But this is it, isn't it? It's not. I know it is bad, and looking back, you go, the behaviour, like that sort of the need to have to say that to men, yes. But that's what it was like back then, and it's not like that now. We've learned from it. We've moved on. You know, it's a shame that it was like that, but we looked at that and we went, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're actually we're gonna teach our kids not to be that way. And so, you know, well, I mean, yeah, there's still remnants of it somewhere, but it's dying out, thankfully. But this is what I love about Rockfield, is it was a safe space for all of you. Not just for the kids and your mum and everyone working there, but for the bands as well. There's that story of Ozzy Osbourne wandering around howling at the moon or whatever it was he was doing, and then they just put a blanket around him or something like that and just bring him in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my mum just put a blanket over his head and brought him in, and he was safe. Yeah,
Yeah.
And there is that. I think at Rockfield, I think it's simply because these bands were in a domestic space. Yes, it's still a working farm, and it was a working farm, but so they've got all the farmyard animals and they've got all the routines of the farm, like the hay baling and the milking the cows, because the cows are up at Little Anchor, and the milk churns would be at the bottom of the hill in the mornings. And they've got all that, but also they've got 2 resident families, mother, father, kids. And so there is that switch up there of not feeling they have to behave or anything like that in that sort of traditional sense, but just relaxing, I think, to a certain degree, because they're surrounded by people who are getting on with their lives as families, going to school, coming home, riding a horse, playing rounders with a tennis racket. So it's that norm domesticity. So they can still go off and get lost in the field and take whatever they want to. I mean, I'm talking 70s, not now. And I remember Lisa Ward reminded me that when we went to school, the drug squad would be at the bottom of the drive, and we just go morning, all of that. But it's just within, it's just within a domestic space, or it was within a, So it was just glorious. And so yes, there's a little bit of threat in the book, but the threat is never at Rockfield. It's that, as you say, it was a farm safe space.
But this is why I wanted to talk to you, because I want people to read this book, because it's like I already said, the layers of it. You're talking about some of the biggest rock stars in history having a glass of milk, and you lot going to school, and then the drug squad are there, but that's just like you just walking past, all right, just like it's nothing. It's such a beautifully written book that conjures up so many wonderful images that I was desperate to get you on, and I'm glad we did. And I could talk to you all day, because these are the stories I want to hear about some of my favourite people in history, and it's been an absolute joy. And where can we find the book?
You can find the book in all good bookshops, and if you like to buy from an indie bookshop, you can go to bookshop.org, and just order it from there if you just want to do it online. It's everywhere.
Wonderful.
I hope.
Well, it won't be, because it's going to sell out now. It's going to sell out, I'm telling you.
Please.
Yeah, it will do. Get yourselves a copy. I promise you, it's one of the best books I've read in a long time. I have the physical copy as well. It's such a lovely thing to flick through and have a look at. She's got some pictures in there as well. It's just a great book. And Tiff, I want to say thank you, because I know you had a bit of a slog last night getting home, and then you got to be up to do things like this, and you've got another one to go and do now. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I really appreciate it.
Oh, honestly, it's been lovely. I've been so relaxed, and I'm so glad that you didn't drink that one night at the Green Man Festival, and you slept in your car, and you came and saw me with an orange and a coffee. I just feel blessed.
It changed my life. I got to do this. What a time to be alive. Thank you, Tiff. Where can we find you on social media, if you would like people to do so?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, just Tiff Murray. And I think I'm Tiffany Murray on Facebook for the old codgers like me out there. And yeah, that's about it, I think.
Lovely. Well, I tell you what, I'd like to see you again. So next time we're around, I'll have a coffee and an orange juice with you. We'll do that.
That would be lovely.
Lovely.
Oh, you mean an orange juice?
Oh no, I had an actual. It was an actual. It was an actual orange.
Actual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't know how you would be sat somewhere just peeling oranges. I mean, I'm happy to do that.
That'd be lovely.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, we'll do that then.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And I hope the Forest of Dean squirrels chewing the line haven't been too, chewy.
We'll find out. We'll find out. This has been Insane in the Membrane.
Yeah.
This has been Tiffany Murray. I've been Rich Wilson, and we'll see you next time.